Brought to you by Telehealth ING, a virtual assistant staffing company for professionals.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cody, the host of the Faces podcast, Entrepreneurs Are People Too, and the founding CEO of Telehealth ING, a virtual staffing organization, and the herein sponsor of my podcast. So I appreciate Telehealth ING for giving me the opportunity to speak with great people like James. James, how are you doing today?
Doing great, Cody. It's a beautiful day here in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho.
Oh, how is it cold? How's everything in Idaho going? Besides flat.
Yeah, we've been getting an early spring here. I'm up in the north where it's the Rocky Mountains. And I mean, just 2 days ago, it snowed in the morning and then it was beautiful sunny in the afternoon. And today we'll get a nice 50, 60 degree spring day.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Wish I could say the same from Vegas. Some days today, good day. 40s, 50s, sunny. Yesterday, it was blowing wind so hard that it was giving us some snow from the mountainsides here in Summerlin, which is the far west of Vegas. So, which is a weird thing to have snow hit you in the face while standing on a tennis court in Vegas. So, strange anomaly.
Yeah, I grew up in Las Vegas. I was there through younger school through high school. It was and lived in Summerlin as well too, so very familiar with the area.
Whoa, perfect. I'm excited to chat more with you, James. And for all the folks listening in, tell us who's James? Who are we speaking with here today?
Yeah, thanks, Cody. So I'm an entrepreneur who's had a career in the accounting world and private equity. Did that for about 10 years before going off on my own. I'm classically trained as a CPA, and the industry I focus on is real estate. So I've done a lot all over the industry, everything from on-site property management, corporate property management, being a CFO of a lending fund to construction companies, other mortgage financing internships. And I just love real estate and really I'm closing on my second boutique motel turnaround today.
Wow. Boutique turnaround. I think it's an interesting opportunity that we're talking with each other, because I was just having a conversation with a broker yesterday, a friend of mine here in Vegas, and he said that he's seen a trend of houses falling through that were in the escrow phase, that people were wanting to rent it from the folks they sold the house to. And he said it's happened about 5 times in the past month or so, where they're literally selling their house because they can't afford to buy it or have it anymore, own it. And so it was a weird trend that he was pointing out. I've never heard of that case going before. Made me think deeper into what's going on in the mechanics of the economy.
Yeah, it's a wild time out there when mortgage rates just shot up almost 3x pretty much overnight, and put a lot of headwinds against real estate ownership for a lot of people.
Well, it's difficult. I mean, Vegas, account a housing crisis or an economic crisis in any matter. Someone who's from Vegas, Vegas has never been spared.
Yeah, it always gets hit hardest. A lot of the tourism industry is driven by the convention industry, and so you guys got hit really hard during COVID. But the past few times I've been out there, I've seen some healthy activity along the strip, and that's always a good sign of the economy. If you go out on a Tuesday night and the casinos are still kind of full, and there's a bunch of satellite parties going on for the conventions.
Correct. It's interesting you say that, James, because I saw online recently someone said that Vegas was like a paradox. It says empty slot booths and $16 drinks. And I was like, what hotels are you going to? Every time I've gone to the strip, we don't go to the strip or anywhere around it. We try not to even cross over the strip, just because of Vegas is still Vegas. Yeah,
absolutely. Those Bellagio and Wynn casinos, they really get you. And it's been an interesting trend seeing Vegas evolve over the past 10, 20, 30 years, where the younger generation, kind of millennials around that age, don't like to gamble as much. And so you saw Vegas start to take a hit in revenue that way. And that's really started to offer a lot of other programming. That's why like the DJ nightclub scene got so big. and they're just trying to make money any way they can. They used to give like a lot of comps out, and you'd be able to get some deals, but now they're just really squeezing every last dollar out of everyone. I think just because gambling revenue's down a little bit with demographic changes.
It's interesting you say that too, because recently I read an article talking about how the net profit of Vegas was down 40%. And so everyone's like, oh my God, the net profit of Vegas is down 40%. But the actual gross revenue was up nearly 20%. And so everyone was, they're talking about the net profit. They're like, oh, it's failing. Or like you just said, they're reinvesting it in different vehicles to find ways to take our money. They're they're coming up with new schemes, and that's the difference between people's financial literacy, not understanding the difference between net and gross.
Yeah, hey, sorry about that.
You're fine.
Yeah, I remember last time I was out there, I just was looking around. I was staying at the Venetian. I'm like, wow, Vegas is just designed to extract every dollar they can from you at every opportunity.
That's so funny. So you grew up in Vegas?
Yes. Yep. So dad was a real estate developer, and he was getting after it in Orange County in the 90s, and they had a economic recession in the county. They took out, I think if I say this correctly, like short-term debt to pay long-term liabilities. They just basically had their financing backwards, and so the county took a slump, and it was, becoming more of a mature area. And my dad was looking into Las Vegas and started building out there before the city even had 1 million people. And so after a few years of commuting, we just moved the whole family out there, first to Green Valley and Henderson, and then over to Summerlin.
That was my transition as well. Started off in Henderson, made my way to Summerlin. We came out here originally during COVID in LA. LA was wild, right? During the beginning days of COVID. And I was going back to my twitchy Marine days. I'm like, well, I've seen this horror film. I know how it ends. All right. First, it starts with rioting, and then, I'm making a last stand on the roof of my house. And so I was like, I'm going to move somewhere where I can have some defense capabilities. And so, I'm a very big 2A, Second Amendment person. And but I was also in the process of getting ready to sell a company. And so it was beneficial in two regards. And so I moved out to Vegas, and I've been between Vegas and Mexico ever since. And so Vegas is one summer in Vegas will make you want to have a place somewhere else.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can't live in the desert anymore. And those are the similar reasons why I moved to Idaho. I remember being in Santa Monica. I was actually moving out of there, and then had a buffer place to live down with family in Orange County. But it was wild out there too. The day I moved out, or I was up there to pack up my place, was the day some of the riots happened in Santa Monica. Peaceful protests. And there's a lot of stuff that you heard didn't make the news, of people breaking into townhomes all through Santa Monica, people getting pulled out of cars. And before that, I had one gun, just small little pistol. But as soon as COVID was hitting in February, I got like 3 more, and I had my whole door barricaded and shotgun ready to go in case anything happened that day. Thank God it didn't, but it was just kind of a sobering moment, like you said. I'm like, I need to get out of here. So now I moved up to Idaho, and I live on a small farm, and I've been taking a lot of training lessons from former Marines and former police officers, and actually learning how to use weapons proficiently.
That's it's hilarious. I actually lived in Culver City before I came out here, so we were right next to each other. That's pretty funny. And you are correct. We had a peaceful protest about a mile from our house, and I was like, they're moving into affluent neighborhoods. Here we are in an affluent neighborhood. I don't want to end up on the news, and so that's why we picked Vegas. And came out to Vegas. It was dead at the time, and then we also started going. We did the Idaho option, right?
Okay.
But Mexico style, and we have a home in the middle of Mexico, close enough to Guadalajara and close enough to a pueblo not to be far enough from anything. However, far enough from everything not to walk anywhere, right? And so you're not going to go anywhere. When we bought the house originally, there was a dirt road that actually led up to the property. So it was a great place to go. But it's good that you take the time to train. I mean, to this day, I train consistently, and I have what feels like decades of shooting experience. And so, I go to various different courses, and I just learned a fun fact about Vegas. It is the #1 city in the United States for gun shootings that originate from road rage. And so, fun award to have there, Las Vegas. But it's an interesting thing, because Idaho, I'm sure where you live, it's pretty quiet, I'm sure, right? Same thing with Mexico. Mexico at large, I will admit, has a lot of dangerous places. Where we live, it's really not. And so it's super quiet, very safe. And so the need of a gun, though it's illegal, isn't even really present for us.
Yeah, I like to say an armed society is a polite society. And when you see a lot of people open carrying around here in Idaho, it makes you think twice before acting a fool.
Correct. It's interesting as well. One of the things you said in the beginning, you said you were classically trained as I thought you were going to say a violinist for a second, because that's usually how that spins up. But as an accountant, and a CPA, I myself am educated as an accountant. However, I was probably one of the only people in my MAC program that was not going to get their CPA license. So, why the accounting route?
I graduated from USC in LA in 2008, when the whole kind of world was upside down in the real estate sector, really specifically. And I always thought I'd just go work for a real estate company. That's what all my internships had been. But I also had an accounting degree, because my freshman year I took an accounting class and it was easy. So I'm just like, okay, well, I'll just add this degree on. And luckily I had that, because starting my accounting career was the best way for me to really get my career started, really learn about kind of the private equity fund side of the real estate industry, how the world is kind of moving away from, mid-size operators to these kind of bigger funds. And it was a really great learning experience to learn by some, former Big Five, Arthur Andersen partners, and really learn the whole alternative investment space. And it's been something that I've been really passionate about, to help people not have to invest through Wall Street, and you can invest in Main Street through a lot of these private equity funds and syndications that people are doing. The Secure Act that came out, the Jobs Act that came out in 2012 really opened the door for crowdfunding. And it's been really cool to see this industry evolve over the past, 12, 13 years.
That's great. And yes, while I, live most of my days, I start my days on Wall Street every day. Where's this thing? And so I still doing this thing back there. But I also, most of my larger investments, long term to short term-ish investments, are through PE firms that are predicated on the fact of the Jobs Act, and so the crowd piece. So are you leading the accounting side of those, or are you actually leading the raising and investment side? What part of that process are you in?
So I'm a little bit of both. So I have a full service CPA firm. We do a lot of taxes and get K1s out for the investors in these private equity funds. And then that chains up and tiers up to the owners or the actual operators or syndicators of these funds, and doing their personal tax returns and tax planning for them. So that's the Stonehand accounting side of the business. And on Stonehand Capital, I've been buying real estate up here in Idaho with the family, closing on our 5th property up here today with one of my clients. And we're working on raising a fund in the next 2 to 3 months to help duplicate the strategy that we've been doing for these past few deals, and that my client's been doing for the past 20, 30 years as an operator.
That's great. And I have a friend of mine who is one of the COOs or by executive vice presidents of the Hagman Group. Are you familiar with them out of Indiana? They run about a cool billion, I think, in farmland investment.
Okay.
Primarily. Very interesting model. And so I've been following them and what they do, and they work across the Midwest in regards to picking up farmland as ways to grow the pensions that they manage, which is, can't go wrong with farmland. I own farmland myself.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that group, but that's the traditional model I learned, where you put together a big fund and get a lot of pension fund investors. Food's great, it's and
Food's great.
on the Maslow hierarchy, it's pretty much near the top need. So water, shelter, food, those are industries that are never going to go away. Even with AI, Chat GPT can't feed you yet.
It's so funny you say that, because I remember years ago at this point when my little brother started being an apprentice for plumbing, and in the state of Utah, it is it seemed much like a doctor route. You have to go through about 7 years of different stages of certifications before you become a master. And his mentality was always like, people need to use the restroom and people need water, right? And here I am. And so now he operates a multi-million-dollar company that he owns. And you're sitting there like, wow, should I have been a plumber? And so, like, maybe he was seeing some essentials that I was not quite identifying early in life.
Yeah, every business really comes down to the same thing once you get to the top and you're running it. So really get your one expertise in one thing. Like, for me, it's CPA and being in real estate. And then, when I'm running a CPA firm, I'm not in the weeds of doing the tax returns every day. I'm giving a lot of consulting and doing coaching calls with clients. But, it's all managing people, managing your customers, managing your employees, doing business development, making content. When you kind of level up to the higher levels of business, it's kind of like the same thing, just like your brother running the plumbing company. He knows how to do all the plumbing, but maybe he's out on job sites every day, maybe not, but maybe he's got a team of 2-3 dozen plumbers working for him, and then he's just managing the business. So as you get further away from actually if you're in a factory making the widgets, the factory owner is not making the widgets, he's making sure the widgets get made,
Yeah, it's something that I've been asked, because right now I'm recording numerous podcasts a week as I'm getting ready to take off time for my newborn that's coming and end of April. And so I've been stacking recording, right? It's coming. Then it's like, how do you take 2 weeks off as a business owner? Like, normally Telehealth could run itself. My team there is phenomenal. Close my eyes, go to sleep, not be at work, go on vacation, and the company will run and grow. Love it. However, when you're in the content, that's the only thing that I'm still waiting to AI myself so I can have Cody AI version do my videos. But we're making a lot of content, because you're right. You in today's world, you're a business owner, you're an influencer, your business development, marketing. You have to be so well-rounded unless you are just fortunate enough to work in a company where there's a person for that, right? And we have a guy for that. You still have to be very well connected, and that's oftentimes what a lot of my clients are trying to do, because they're mostly one-person shops, 1 to 10, and they're like, well, we're accountants, but we don't know a darn thing about marketing, right? And so, or like, oh, how do I edit videos? Or who wants to send messages on LinkedIn for possible client engagements? Not me, right? I don't want to do that. So yeah, but it's good to have someone for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I hired a team out of Arizona to help me with the marketing side of things. I hired them about 9 months ago. I'm really pleased with kind of the personal brand they've helped me to be able to develop online, and kind of just closed my first client just from kind of blind LinkedIn outreach over the past week or so. So it's exciting to see kind of it start to work. I understand it takes some time to build up these presences. I told my team, look, let's look back 5 years from now and see how we did. I know it takes a minute to get things going. I feel like a lot of people maybe don't have patience with advertising or social media. They're like, oh, I spent 10 grand on ads last month. Why didn't I get any new business? Well, it was your first month. It takes a minute to get these things out there.
And this is going to be a great cut because I'm going to have the team cut this for one of the folks I'm consulting for right now. Because occasionally I have the opportunity through all my clients at Telehelping, where an accounting firm actually, where they will have virtual assistants like, well, it's not working the way I want it to work. And I'm like, well, let's talk about it. And so oftentimes I'll find in those cases where I do have a consulting relationship is because virtual assistants are great. And I tell people all the time, like, they're great for doing things. However, they need someone to have an overarching strategy and direction for them. They need someone to lead them, right? And, in this particular case, wonderful accountant, not a great marketer, right? Not a great sales guy. And so he needed someone to come in, and oftentimes I'll do short-term consulting relationships. But one thing I always tell them, if I'm going to do this with you, you have to understand this is not going to be a tomorrow thing, right? The first thing I do is set a 3, 6, and 9 month plan for them, right? And I said, listen, I'm going to give you a 9-month plan. I'm only going to commit 1 month at a time to you. However, you'll have a 9-month plan, but understand it may take all 9 months because, you're right. It takes peeling back layers. It takes building presence. It takes understanding who you're targeting. And so, you seem very niche into real estate. You seem like you know who you're targeting.
Yeah, absolutely. So with your telehelping company, where are you sourcing talent for American companies from?
Only Mexico. And so we only hire in Mexico, and we work with companies across the United States, Canada, and as far east and west as Taipei and Tel Aviv.
Okay.
But primarily 70 to 80% of all our business folks are inside the United States, but only in Mexico we hire.
Cool. And are they around the city where you have a house, or are they kind of all over Mexico?
So all over Mexico. It started off as an actual call center company. And so when I had a healthcare company before, I needed nurses. And so I was hiring nurses out of the Philippines to speak Spanish. And I thought that was crazy. And so I was like, well, this is an asinine thought process. And so I bet I can do this cheaper. So I started a company with my wife in Mexico to source nurses. And what we realized as we continue to grow, we went from 1 call center to 6 call centers, that there's various competencies across Mexico. And so based on Monterrey University, Guadalajara, all of them, they have different focuses. And that's how they group their universities. And so we have different locations across Mexico, but most of our virtual assistants work from home. And they can be as close to the United States as Tijuana and as far south as Chiapas. And so, but we only hire in Mexico because the value of a BPO is legal protection for the client, right? As well as understanding that there's someone that is going to be responsible to manage and care for the person who is, sometimes a world away from you.
Yeah. So are you still doing the BPO model, or are you doing more direct placements now?
So we're all BPO, but we're considered boutique in the sense that we hire to the job. And so one thing that I learned years ago was this idea of like a jobs to be done model. And so usually our clients will come and say, hey, this is the job I'm trying to achieve. And we work backwards to a job description. And then we have a network of folks pre-qualified that we've screened, but we hire directly to it. And we're just not we have a bench of 600 people waiting for someone to ask for a person. We have you a marketer, pick a tire off the shelf. We found that hiring directly to the need increases our placement accuracy. And, so much money can be wasted in hiring a person, replacing a person when you're a BPO. And so we hover around the 95% placement rate. And so we like to place like a penguin and mate for life. Generally. And our average is like 1.5 years, they'll stay into the role. And so, it's a nice thing, but we try to, the most of concentration of our work is in the beginning stage, and then, hire good people, let them do the thing, and just manage the relationship from there.
Cool. You said you were moving to Vegas around the time you were selling a company. What company was that? Are you still anything like that, or tell me a little bit more about that?
So I was in healthcare before. Before COVID became a thing, I started a small healthcare company with a little bit of private equity money based on an AI model that we had that helped us triage and disposition patients to various pathways depending on their acute level. And so as they come out of the hospital, oftentimes, if you or James would come out of the hospital, we're like, good luck, James. Go see your primary care doctor. Here's your paperwork, right? Well, James could have just came off a traumatic event, being weaned off fentanyl, right, and put on some Tylenol and telling him to go home. James may not have a primary care doctor, right? James may not have a car to go to the pharmacy that you wrote the scripts for. James may not be able to pay for the scripts once he gets to the pharmacy. All those things attributed to a very large readmission rate, which is going back to a hospital within 30 days, which at the time, the numbers could be different now, was about $40 billion a year was wasted just in sending people back to the hospital for an event that was related to their previous admission. And so what we would do is we would directly plug into the various, we had APIs for top 7 CRMs for hospitals, and then we would tie into the system. They would be dropped into ours, and then we would triage them and manage them with remote nurses from Mexico, the United States, the doctors here. And then we would take a portion of the savings. Oftentimes we would work with hospitals at a 20% readmission rate, which is 20% chance, a 1 in 5 chance of going back to the hospital.
Wow.
Right? It's crazy. And we take them down to about 5% most times. And so we take about the 5% and we would collect our shared savings portion. So we'd only make money if they saved money. And so we were putting our money where our mouth is. That was absorbed by a larger healthcare organization. And at that time, I was wanting to get out of the business anyways. If you work through healthcare in COVID, you wanted to get out, right? And so funny thing is, me and the chief medical officer, both of us after that, we both walked out of healthcare. We're like, forget that business. Took some time off, and then we retained the ownership of Telehealth, my wife and I, because it was a Mexico-based company, and you have to be a Mexican citizen to own the company. We still maintain and control the contract for the larger healthcare organization, and I just took the company in a different direction. We got out of healthcare. It's our only healthcare relationship now. We just found our niche in a different way. We found lawyers, accountants, and CFAs being more aligned with what we were able to consistently manage and place. And healthcare was difficult because of new laws allowing nurses to get quick visas to the United States. And so we'd hire great nurses and they would leave us to go work in the United States. And I was like, we can't keep doing this. We can't keep placing nurses for people in the United States and then losing them. So we just switched our model.
Wow. That's a pretty cool story. You're able to monetize the value you created from the healthcare company, but still spin out a company to keep you as an entrepreneur without having to start from scratch all over again. You had a nice thing you already kind of systemized and built out.
It was a gray area for all those who may have not have gotten into the level of business where you have PE and VC money and you're the fiduciary of an organization who starts another organization to support that company. As entrepreneurs, sometimes we're really fixated on solving the problem, right? We're able to solve the problem. And then we don't realize at times that maybe we have created a problem. That was an issue with telehelping at first. I was able to take our cost from $2,500 a person in the Philippines to about $1,500 at cost in Mexico. So I saved us a considerable amount of money. However, wife owning a business that I'm using to, work for a business that I have private money for was a little bit of a sticky position at first. Luckily, I wasn't making any money off of it. Telehelping wasn't making money off the relationship. It was purely for the focus of getting good people, good labor. And that was the only contract we had until I decided to rebrand and actually do the business, because my wife and one of her friends were the ones kind of hiring people to do the nursing side while I ran the old company.
Yeah, interesting. I found those related party transactions come up a lot, especially in my industry where, my client and I will have a lot of like the vertical integrations. Like he has the vertical GC. He's been doing property management himself, which we're layering in accountants for him and helping to manage the properties we're doing together. And it's just a matter of disclosure. If you're like charging market or under market rates to like your own fund or your own investors, like it's just kind of the way the world works in the space. You just got to tell them up front, like, don't be sneaky about it. You're like, hey, I'm going to charge an 8% management fee here off gross revenue when market's 10%, like I'll give you guys a deal. I'm still making money on the back end and through partial ownership, but we'll get 20% off the management fees, and we'll have someone really aligned with the interests of the owners managing the property.
Correct. Yeah, and that's what it was. Ultimately, we had the best interest in the organization in place, and we were able to identify and communicate with all investors that slewed away any problems. And we still to this day give them a very favorable rate, right? So they pay much less than, say, if someone were to come with us today and say, I want to hire nurses, how much we would charge them to undergo that process. So and that's how telehelping became a thing. I never thought I would have gotten into the international staffing world of things, but here we are, and it's a fun, scary place to be in some days.
Yeah, it's always fun and scary being an entrepreneur. That's a great way to put it. So how have you seen AI impacting kind of this offshoring, nearshoring in your telehelping business? Have you guys implemented anything across the board, maybe in operations or the client-facing apps? What have you seen out there?
Yeah, we use various AI tools across the organization on the sense of compliance, as well as on like communication levels. So all of our virtual assistants, being English as a second language, are encouraged to utilize. We have a corporate account for ChatGPT that allows them to plug it into their emails to make sure that they're not missing some of the subtleties that is English as a first language. But on the compliance side, because we work in people's accounting side of things and financing, our staff does have AI tools that monitor for illicit activity, and even from the perspective of them not doing illicit activity, but maybe exposing themselves to hacks and malware. So we use AI in that regard. Luckily for us, we're not the type of company that's we're not getting replaced by AI anytime soon, because we only work with what I refer to as the top 1% of Mexican professionals fitting in roles that are working with what we would consider the top professions in the United States. The people who are bar certified, CPAs and CFAs, like these folks, they're not hiring some $500 to $800 person in Mexico to do their chats. Oftentimes our lawyers are hiring Mexico-based lawyers, our accountants are hiring accountants, and our CFAs are hiring people who have masters in marketing. And so we're in a position where we're not too impacted by that, but we've been able to improve what we do with AI, do it in a better way.
Yeah, interesting. I was wondering if maybe people would be hiring less offshore if they're able to replace some of the tasks they do now with AI as well. I don't know if that's impacted your business at all.
Yeah, I don't know of anyone who's been able to really replace something with AI. I know that there is an idea of a trend that we can, right? I've been seeing a lot of advertisements for AI employees and things like that. But if anyone has, I'm sure everyone listening to this, because our age group is between 25 and 35 and identify as entrepreneurs, I'm sure all of them use ChatGPT, right? That's listening. Yeah. And so they know this. And I'm sure everyone here understands that ChatGPT is not writing your email still. I say at best, ChatGPT is 60% of what I communicate, right? If I want to write something that's lengthy or have a body or something, maybe it's 60% accurate. And so it's not replacing anybody. I think the idea would be great one day to have AI doing things for us, but it's yet to show me any value that I'm going to put my reputation and money on it. I don't even trade on the market with AI tools.
Yeah, it can be a bit frustrating if you're on the other end and you're talking to an AI agent. Like even Marriott, I was booking a hotel for a conference I'm going to. Shout out to Brandon Turner's REI Summit in Austin, Texas, June 1st to the 3rd. And I was booking the hotel there, and I got the, the group code, the sponsorship code, whatever. But I wanted to add an extra day on to the end, and it was blocked through the booking calendars. I got the days I could, and called in to add the extra room on. And it took me 3 times. Every time I would get the AI answering thing and trying to get it to adjust the existing reservation that was happening, and technically another system just did not happen. I had to call in like 3 times to finally get a human being who is able to tell me, okay, yeah, you booked through a different reservation system. We can't just extend it by 1. We have to book you another day, and I'll put a note in here for the human being to link it, so it's not perfect. And I see companies like shove this down our throats when it's really not working well. I've heard a lot of companies trying to scale back like their customer service call centers and trying to replace that with AI, but it's not great right now. But I see that it really could disrupt and displace a lot of the labor force very soon.
No, it absolutely could. And, we have explored models, even on my own marketing team of how to, make better edits, better shorts and things like that. And it's a great tool, right? AI is a great tool. But, I just yesterday, I called into an office, and someone picked up who sounded like a person. I'm like, great, talking to a human being. Like, yeah, I'm connecting you now. What do you mean you're connecting me? I'm talking to you. And they're like, oh no, I'm an AI assistant to a audibly impaired person. So I'm going to provide them sign language in your voicemail. They were AI and they were going to do sign language. And I was like, wow, I chuckled. I'm like, this is cool, right? That's a great way to use AI. Which was a person who had to sit there and listen and sign to a video, is now an AI projecting onto a screen. So that's really cool. Great way of doing that. I saw that 5 years ago, right? When we're sitting around and telehealth was coming a thing, I was like, well, we'll never get into phone answering services, right? Our call centers, they were triage centers. They were outbound sales for solar, and they were more complex relationships and things like that. They weren't any type of very basic. Those jobs will definitely be replaced with AI. Those are going to be taken out. However, I think I would have sold telehelping, I think, by the time we get to that stage.
Yeah, it's happening fast. I'm trying to make sure that I will survive. I've been coming up with this phrase. You need to master the AI robots before they master you. Like I feel like we're just like the robot managers now, and we need to make sure that we as human beings are staying on top of the latest tools. And I've also called AI right now augmented intelligence. It takes where you're at right now and maybe can help augment it. I don't really feel like it's another artificial intelligence human being like I'm talking to. I think we're using the words a little too liberally.
I agree.
But it is definitely coming, and it's coming much faster than even all the experts were predicting of how good it would get, how quick.
I do refer to it as assistant intelligent.
Yeah.
Because I think AI gives people the ability to be their own executive, right? And it's like, you do this, and then as an executive, you are going to be the person who has to put the final stamp on things, especially if it's going outbound. So you have to look at it like, all right, well, let's edit, and then do this again. I mean, it's the same thing I had to tell some of my team members, American-based and Mexican-based, like, hey, listen, love that you're using AI and you're leaning into the processes that we're trying to implement. However, understand it cannot do your job for you, right? And I've had to tell people in the company, I'm like, we will ban AI, right? If you keep using Chat GPT, we will stop using Chat GPT. If you realize that you're trying to have it walk for you, when it's more so like an assistant to your walk, right? But some people use it way too much.
Yeah, I'm just worried about the day. Like, even if I was thinking this last night, like people writing books with AI, I'm like, are we going to be reading physical books written by like AI slop writing here, in the near future? There's probably books out there already. I just think it's a crazy world right now with all of this. And I feel like my accounting firm is probably the biggest one at risk. That's why I'm making a mad dash to buy as much real estate as possible, just because, there's going to be a further divide between, I feel like the owner class, people who own things, and then the working class. And I don't see how we get out of this without like a universal basic income for a lot of people. And I think there's going to be a lot of crazy things happening over the next 5 to 10 years with our workforce, how it's going to be reshaped by this. It'll be really interesting to see how it all ends up at the end of the day. Both like still need people that are plumbers, still need people out there banging hammers and building stuff, So maybe we'll get back to more of a productive economy in a way of people having to go into more trades. And, Elon Musk, I think years ago, or no, sorry, it wasn't Elon Musk. It was one of the heads of like the oil and gas companies out there saying like our limit to grow right now is not based on the amount of oil in the world. Our limit to grow is based on human capital. We can't get enough petroleum engineers to do all the work we have in front of us. And so I feel like with AI taking a lot of, cushy, maybe office jobs, people might have to go back out into the blue collar jobs and actually create value instead of being in this financialized service industry that America has more and more become.
No, yeah. And I think that we're far away. I'd say 5 years away from the first jobs in the United States being reportedly fully replaced with AI. It will happen.
That was happening today. People are getting replaced by AI today.
You think full jobs?
Full jobs are being replaced today. Then I think you're right on the 5 to 7 years of just massive disruption happening. But people right now are getting replaced by AI. Maybe like instead of hiring 4 people, people will just hire 1 person. And that's a replacement.
True, yeah, that's true. No, I mean, and so you're definitely preparing for it. I likewise have been prepared for it. I always say at the end of the day, I'm really doing all this because entrepreneurs need something to do, and I'm ready to retire tomorrow if need be. But I think that's what you said was hilarious because I got a degree in accounting because I thought to myself at the time, I was like, well, if I ever need this, I can always do accounting. Like I can always just go become a CPA, and like if worst case scenario, if I lost everything, I'm like, I'll just go to be an accountant, right? And that's going away. And so it's an interesting perspective. And I think that the one thing I would pick up as a theme from our conversation is the adaptability and preparation. And so we live right now in a world that is changing so rapidly, right? We don't have the luxury of, what we say like 90 to 1999 or 2000, where right before, like, not a whole lot happened in those time periods. It seems like minor improvements, right? We got some emails and some computers and stuff coming out, but right now we're in a world where it's like, we could blink and quantum computers could become a thing. And, that 5 to 7 years we just talked about could end up being 2 years, and we could be in a tight spot.
Yeah, that's a really good point. As an older millennial, I think you're probably in the same demographic as me. If we really saw the change of all the computers coming online, going from that, bing, 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 56K dial-up connection to cable internet, to Starlink now, to having our Nokia brick phones and the Razor flip phones, and now getting the iPhones. It was really cool, I think, to see the world the way it was before all this came on. And I feel like our generation really sits at a really cool inflection point for humanity and technology. And I think we're seeing another one of those inflection points right now, where people being born right now are going to grow up in a completely different world 5 to 7 years from now. And there's going to be this older demographic that is going to slowly die out that knew a different way. And I think keeping some of those ideas and traditions is really important. Knowing how to navigate by like a map is important instead of just opening your phone like Waze, take me to where I need to go. I think still being able to do things by hand is going to become somewhat of an art, but also incredibly important from, a prepper's perspective as well, in case, the grid can go down.
Right.
And all this could go away pretty easily. And I feel like COVID kind of lit a fire under my butt of just how fragile our whole interconnected ecosystem of economy and life and society is.
No, and I mean, it goes right back to the very roots of our call. We were trying to jump on one system and we had to move to the backup, right? I think that you said it well. It's the same way the military preps, right? We have beautiful GPS devices and technology that allows us to do a lot of things in the military. However, we still learn how to use a compass, right? And orient ourselves with a map. And, the COVID situation, a lot of people were buying water and toilet paper. I was buying ammunition because I realized that was going to be the real currency.
Yeah.
So, if things really went south, no one was accepting dollar bills and gold, right? It was going to be every man for themselves. And, I think that's well said, James. And I love that what you're doing and how you're not only how you ended up in your position, but how you're preparing yourself for what is going to be a change that much of us are ignoring. And so, I think that you'll be in the small bucket of people that will not be surprised and will actually be like, well, I saw this coming, right? I'm going to go sit on my front porch and watch the Idaho sunset, right? Yeah. So while everyone's trying to figure this out. And so, with that being said, I really thank you for making the time to be on the podcast today. And it was one of those great ones where while I would have loved to peel back the layers of your business, we ended up chatting about things that I couldn't have scripted.
Cool. Yeah, this was a really good time. You never know where these podcasts are going to go, and I enjoyed the conversation we had. So if your audience wants to get in touch with me, I'm active on LinkedIn as James Bohan, CPA, MRED. And then my website is stonehand.com. That's stone like a rock and Han like Han Solo. And we help people pay as little in taxes as legally possible.
Man, you took the words out of my mouth. I always say that. I'm like, I want to pay the least amount of taxes that I can legally get away with, please. No, James, thank you so much. And for all those watching, if you don't know where the rewind button is and you can't go back to exactly what James just said, you can always email us at info@thefacespodcast.com. And one of my team members will make sure you get his information and point you in the right direction. I jokingly say that because it's hilarious, but it's also happened. So thank you so much for all of you listening. James, I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You too, Cody. Take care.
This video was brought to you by our official sponsor, Telehealth ING. Need support for your business? Telehealth ING connects you with top-tier remote staff to help you streamline operations and fuel growth. Go to telehealthing.com and get started today.